Oftentimes creators and even brands, we create in silos and we don't consider our audience when we're making content. And so if I know my most talkative audience is on TikTok, then I'm going to make the content for TikTok and I could repurpose everywhere else. But if I go in there with a strategy to make it for every platform, it's going to be overwhelming for me. So I try not to overthink it. I try to still stay creative. I'll go outside. I do daily walks. I go to museums. I try to stay inspired by other people's art. And I think that social media now, whereas before it was kind of like a cool hobby, it's an art form now.
That was Vannesia Darby, Digital Marketing Director at Shondaland, a production company founded by television writer and producer Shonda Rhimes. Vannesia's inspiring career journey showcases her ability to adapt and innovate, from landing her first job through savvy social media use to mastering the shift to digital and streaming platforms. In her current role, Vannesia spearheads social media strategy, fostering vibrant community engagement. Alongside her professional achievements, Vannesia is also pursuing a PhD at Kennesaw State University, delving into cutting-edge research on social media influencer marketing and brand transgressions, further cementing her expertise in the digital landscape. Future Dr. Vannesia Darby, welcome to Artisanal Insights.
Well, hello there. I have to get used to people saying that. That's weird.
It is weird. It is weird. We're full disclosure, we're both in doctoral programs.
I'm about to say the same thing to you too.
Yeah. It's a very weird thing. It's funny. It's been a while since we've seen each other in person, but I joke with people all the time that I want to be you when I grow up because you're doing so much right now. It's just like, from volunteering and you're running a business and the digital media director for Shondaland. And oh, by the way, a PhD student.
By the way, I'm going to sit down after this. I promise. This is my last overachieving thing I'm doing and I'm retiring.
I hope so. Because I'm exhausted just watching you on LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's fine though.
But okay, so let's back up before we get into all that fun stuff. And we've had this conversation before, but the story about how you landed your first job is one of my favorite stories that you tell. Would you be willing to share that with us before we dig in a little more deeply?
So I started stalking on social media for a long time. So my very first job in the industry, I worked under Tracy Artist, who is a world-renowned gospel music powerhouse, and she broke Kirk Franklin, Kurt Carr, Byron Cage, all these heavy hitter, Grammy Award-winning artists. So I saw someone tweet a magazine on Twitter back in the day, but when it was Twitter, not
when
X.
It was Twitter.
Yeah. And they had this huge feature on her. And I had been, stalking the gospel music industry, but I never heard her name. At that time, I was graduating, didn't have a job. I was a campus leader. I studied abroad, had all these different things, but didn't have a job in the industry. And so I emailed her. Well, I actually DM'd her on Facebook first. And I said, hey, I hear this industry is really who you know, not just what you know. Would you be willing to give me advice? And she said, sure, and gave me her email address. And I emailed her. I attached my resume, which I thought it was so lame to do at the time. I was like, this is so crazy. And I interned at EMI, and the VP GM over there was Larry Blackwell Jr. She and Larry went back 25 years.
Okay.
And so she called him, did an unofficial reference check, and said, who's this Vannesia girl? And he's like, oh, she's dope, get her. And then I moved to Cincinnati. She was hiring for a marketing assistant, and literally sight unseen. The first time I saw her was when I was looking for apartments. The next week I was working as her assistant. And it was a crash course in the music industry. Everyone called the office. I learned radio, I learned marketing. We put on events. It was crazy in such a good way. And, that same boss, that was my intern boss, Larry Blackwell Jr., he became the VP GM at Motown Gospel because they sold to Universal. And he called me and said, hey, would you want to come work for me? And I said, sure. And I packed my bags and moved to Tennessee, and I've been here ever since.
And how long ago would that have been?
That was 14 years ago. What year are we? 12 years ago. No, 13 years ago.
13 years ago.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
It seems like, all kumbaya when you talk about it, but I was fighting for my life, because you're looking at apartments. It's an entry-level job, and although you're gaining the experience, to go from being a campus leader to being a marketing assistant, I thought it was like a demotion. I felt like I don't need to climb the ladder in that sense, but no one knew me in the music industry. I was big on campus, but once you graduate, you still have to take those transferable skills and put them somewhere else. And so I started from the bottom, and I was, plugging up Blackberries, and I was picking up kids, and I was escorting talent from the green room to the stage. And so once you get to the point to where you realize those muscles were so important to flex, then you understand every single role. I can talk to the assistant, I can talk to the coordinator, I can talk to the manager, I can talk to the CEO. And so it was so necessary, but I definitely didn't see that back then.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess now probably with a little bit of hindsight, it's really interesting to have been in the music industry during that era where we were really starting to shift to the streaming platform. And now that you're looking back on it now, what was that like?
It was so crazy because there was this intersection between music and tech that was happening.
Yeah.
And I remember when Apple Music was starting to change over to Apple Music, right? It was iTunes, iPod, iPad, and they were like, hey, we don't want to be known as we want to be known as Apple. Like, that's the name of our company. And so I remember when everything flipped to Apple Music, I was in the conference room with my intern, and we just watched it on our little iPhone 4s. We watched it.
Yeah.
And I think it was so interesting because I didn't realize that, growing up and just being really into tech and computers. My dad's a computer engineer, and so we always had a computer in our house, and computers were second nature to me. I was cutting ringtones in high school for my friends, and I would, back when we had to pay for text messaging, okay?
Yes.
And so to be in that era when you're coming out of MySpace pages and Instagram doesn't even have video yet, and social cam is all the rave, and to figure out how to take all these platforms that people thought were just ways to connect with other people, how to take those platforms and actually transition to marketing was almost instinctual. Like, it was very easy. And I became known as the girl that did digital marketing. Like, hey, just give her social media, she's fine. But I had no idea it would get to where it is now.
Yeah. Yeah. I was going to ask that, like, now looking at it now, like, do you consider yourself as having been on the forefront of all of that? Because that would have been like 2010, 12-ish.
Yeah, 2012, 13. Yeah.
Yeah, right when Instagram's really taken off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think the funny thing is, for me, especially in the music industry, you kind of see the cycles happen over and over, right?
Yeah.
So when we move from records to cassettes, or 8-tracks to cassettes, and then we move to CDs, and then we move to paying for full music, and then you can actually download the song that you like. And so I think it's just the same thing, but in different ways. So when I saw that happening, it reminded me of when I stopped using a cassette and I started using a CD player. When I stopped using a Walkman and I had to really be still because we didn't have anti-skip, right?
Yes.
Like, if you're trying to run and still hold your CD player, which I would try to do when I was younger, your CD would skip. Yep. And so to move from that to streaming to not even paying for music anymore, like, you have to find other ways to create commerce. You have to have some ingenuity. But I felt like it happened over and over in the music industry. So I wouldn't say I would be in the forefront, but I was definitely along that pivotal change.
Yeah.
Now, what I think happened with social media that didn't happen with some of those earlier shifts, that it allowed people to have commentary along the way and allowed people to be a part of the process, whereas before they kind of were... they kind of felt the effects of the process before. But now they were able to say, oh, I don't go to MySpace anymore. I go to iTunes. I go to Apple Music. I go to Spotify. Some of those things weren't happening. And then I think when Universal brought in, like, a VP of streaming, I saw that, like, org announcement go out. And I was like, whoa, this is a big thing. I just started taking notice of how we were intersecting tech and music, but using it in a way that was marketable and profitable. A lot of people see the shifts, but when you put business in it, that's when it becomes like something that you need to really pay attention to.
Yeah. And you have those aha moments when that happens.
Yeah.
So at some point, as this is all happening, you decide, I think I want to go out on my own. Like, you have a job with a paycheck and benefits at this point. Like,
full benefits.
Yeah.
Universal Music Group was good to me.
Yes, yeah. So what was the point when you said, okay, I want to go out and do this on my own? How did you know that internally?
Yeah, it was very simple. I wasn't making a lot of money,
Okay.
I think for me, there's nothing wrong with learning, and doing the grunt work, which I felt like I did.
Yeah.
And I told myself, okay, when you get to year 3, in the industry where you kind of, some people now, people know what you're known for, then you can start making some changes. So initially, I went back to graduate school because I wanted to be a professor, because I wanted to teach the students that were coming into the game what I was learning. I never got a job. And I was like, I'm dope. What is happening? Like, you have your quarter-life crisis. What's going on? And by this time, I had some success at Motown where people were bringing me in meetings. They were asking me to host their different events. Like, people knew me for my personality and my skill at that point, which I still hadn't honed yet. And people started hitting me up on the side saying, hey, can you write this press release? Hey, can I work with you? And so I said, well, I have a roommate. I'm in grad school. If I don't do it now, this will be the brokest I ever am. So if I don't do it now, then it may be more expensive to pivot later. It was only going to be for a year. That's the thing. That's the thing. It was only going to be for a year. And I kept going. And then 8 years later, I'm still here.
You're still going.
I'm still going.
Yeah.
So I think it's like, yes, I knew that I was, of course, getting asked to do additional work. But something in me knew it wasn't it. And I remember on my third day there, and this was like my dream company too, because I'd interned there too. I remember my third day, I was like, oh, this isn't it. But I signed a year-long lease. So I have to stay here for at least a year.
Yeah.
And then I remember, I think it was like maybe in November, December, I remember waking up and fighting the urge to get ready for work. And I looked up at my ceiling and I was like, I'm going to quit. And once I just said it out loud, it kind of deactivated all that anxiety around like, what am I going to do, right? I was like, you'll figure it out. And my dad, he was like, what are you doing? And my dad's, in addition to being a computer engineer, he's also a military combat veteran and a preacher. And so I grew up with church and state in my house. My mom was a probation officer. So you don't just like quit on a whim. You know, there has to be a plan. And I said, well, if I can't figure it out, then we wasted our money at Bradley and I'm wasting my money at MTSU because I'm majoring in business. So I should know how to run a business, which wasn't necessarily the same correlation, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the catalyst was I wanted to make more money. I wanted to have upward mobility, which wasn't an option at that time. I was very clear on my positioning in the company that I wanted, and there just were no paths for me to get there. And so once I realized it was kind of a dead end until somebody retired, I was like, nah, I'm going to go ahead and figure this out.
And chart your own path.
Yeah. And so that's when I started Moxie Nashville from my bedroom on an HP laptop that was on life support. And I took a job at the YMCA, like a part-time gig, because I still wanted to go to all my group fit classes. I wasn't going to have insurance at the time. And you get your membership for free. And I was like, well, I just want a Y membership. That was my bar, was a Y membership. And then I started doing their marketing, and then I started picking up clients. And I didn't tell anyone for about 8 months that I left because I needed to figure out what I was doing. And it's hard to figure that out on social media. And so, and I think sometimes when people do this, they tell people too soon. So I took a, spiritual journey. I figured out what I wanted to say. I tried to refine my message. And then I started with the photo shoot. And then I started retouching images. And then I started with the website. But it took a while. I think I quit in April. I didn't launch publicly until March of the following year.
Okay. And so now Moxie's in its 8th year.
Yeah.
What has that experience been like of trying to put it all together and run your own agency, particularly, and you focus on digital content and all aspects of it. So what has that journey been like?
I never thought about it, right? I thought if there was a skill I was deficient in, I would take a webinar and I would learn it. And at the time, webinars were like starting to pop up, And so if I wanted to learn something, like I wanted to learn ConvertKit, which is now Kit, I wanted to learn that. Okay, so they were hiring for like a part-time position, and I just took that job. And then I asked around, like, hey, does your webinar producer need any help? And they were like, no. Little did they know she was drowning. Shout out to Issa. And so like a couple months later, that opened up the door for me to learn how to be their associate webinar producer. So like they were a client of mine, and I was like working with Pat Flynn, Amy Porterfield, like those big name people in the tech and marketing world. And I was setting up their webinars. I was like, okay, what am I doing? And so that kind of opened up the door. So I looked at every opportunity to learn, but I never thought, there's something that I'm deficient in, I can't learn it. It was like, girl, you got to eat. And you like to eat good. So, yeah, and by the grace of God, my name was passed around so much. Moxie was a completely referral business for the first 6 years. And then I wanted to try my hand at working with a comedy client, so I pitched to them, and that was the first client I ever pitched to. And then that turned around and offered me another influencer client. So I started going and work with influencers. And so doing the work in the first 3 years was so pivotal for Moxie. My motivation of wanting nice things and wanting to go somewhere and not have to beg or ask anybody, really want to be independent with my money, and learning how money is such a resource, especially for women who weren't always allowed their own money until like the 1970s. So it was kind of like my own act of liberation to make sure that I knew how to do stuff and that I could be self-sufficient in my business. Didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, that was definitely my motivation.
Interesting. Yeah. So what does Moxie look like right now as we're talking? Do you have people who work for you, or what kind of industries are you working with at the moment? Yeah,
so as of now, I have scaled down, which was interesting to do. It took me almost as long to scale down as I did to scale up.
Yeah.
So I just let go of my last 2 team members. And so it's a one-woman show again. Now it's more so of the teaching and training and speaking, which I had leaned into a little bit about 2 or 3 years after doing like the agency side. But when I went back to school, I said, okay, I need to focus on what I'm doing, and I can't do that and give all to my clients at the same time. So I slowly started trickling them off. And so now I still have my main course called Get Your Business Together. And I do one-off projects, but nothing extreme anymore. So I will always have a business of some sort. But, running an agency is hard.
Yeah.
Like it's difficult. And trying to be there for your clients and pair the right team member with the right client. And so I don't know if I would ever want to do that again, but Moxie at that time definitely served the purpose that it needed to serve.
Yeah. Well, it was funny because I remember the day that I was like scrolling through LinkedIn, and it wasn't too long. I think it was maybe like we were just kind of coming out of the pandemic a little bit, and we'd been having conversations, and I looked at my LinkedIn and it says, Vannesia works for Shonda Rhimes now? And I went, how did that happen? And so I'm curious because we've never discussed this about that pivot where you decided you wanted to kind of go back into like the actual employee side again. Yeah. And so what kind of propelled you over to that side again?
That's so funny. I remember posting that running a business, like I said, is hard.
Yeah.
And I had gotten to the point to where my body physically wasn't right. Like I was sleepy all the time. Like just certain things I started to notice, especially after the pandemic, I burned out. And I said, okay, what would it look like to go back into work? Because my goal was never to be this entrepreneur that has scale and scale and scale. That was never my goal. I wanted to be a GM and follow in one of my mentor's footsteps at a label. And so I'm like, okay, well, what does your dream look like now? And I started envisioning what going back to work would look like. How can I make this work? Do I need to go into an office? Do I want to be remote? Do I want to be an individual contributor? Do I want to be a supervisor or a people manager? And I started really asking myself those questions and then realizing, well, having a job isn't bad. I was like, it's not bad if it works for you.
Yeah.
And so I started singling out companies that I thought were just doing dope stuff. And there was literally an opening for Shondaland. And I was looking at production houses, too, because I love creating content. I was like, okay, what if I get into production? And again, I'm just exploring at this point. And there was a job for a social media manager, and it was the only remote position. And I was like, God, is this my job?
Yeah.
And I applied, and I kept making it through the rounds in the interview process. And so ended up getting it. This is now my 3rd year. Incredible. Like, it has been such an amazing game changer for me to really flex my skills in a different way. And the thing about when you're an entrepreneur and when you're the top of your company, the company is only as good as you, right? And so in order for you to get better, and I think John C. Maxwell talks about this called the law of the lid. If your company is an 8 and you're a 10, the best your company can be is a 10. So in order to get your company up to a 10, you have to be at least a 12, right? And so at some point, you max out.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I don't even know if I'm that good anymore because I haven't based myself on anybody else. And so I got the job. It was a complete game changer for me. And it really allowed me to see, one, Moxie was doing way too much. I was offering way too many services. And it allowed me to see how quick I had gotten in even content creation. It was just a great benchmark, and the team is incredible, And so I think for me, I always try to leave myself open to new opportunities and never limit myself to one sort of paradigm and viewpoint that people see me. And so, yeah, that's what got me to Shondaland.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. So what do your days look like now? Are you creating the content? Are you managing the team that creates the content? Because again, check your LinkedIn profile. You're moving up the ladder pretty quickly. So how much are you still doing hands-on? How much are you strategizing, and how does that all work?
So now I started off being the one that was executing, and I had a counterpart, and we handled like all the content, and we reported to someone. Now I'm the one that people report to, which is crazy to me because I was just trying out this job thing, and now I'm like a director. So I'm the digital marketing director, and I get to help strategize the digital content that we put on social media. And also I get to work with our teammates as far as the digital content on other properties. So like our website, we help to promote our shows, television and Shondaland audio and editorial content and consumer products. And so now I'm in a lot more meetings. I will say that. But it's like being in Moxie all over again, but now instead of doing the whole enchilada, you get to do one or two pieces. So whereas before I was leading the team and I might execute a little bit and then I might have to hire someone, now it's like those duties are split. And I think being able to, again, flex different muscles, it's a sharpening tool. Like I feel like I am just like trying new things. I'm stretching myself as a creative, and it's been a really interesting ride. So right now, my day-to-day, I go in and I make sure my team is good. I'm checking the content and making sure I approve the content. I'm having meetings. I'm strategizing. And when this comes out, I'll probably be just finishing hiring my last team member.
So how big is your team once you get that last hire on board?
The digital marketing team is 3 people, but we're part of the whole Marcom team. And then we have a digital media team too. So I always say 3 people for us, but we interface with so many other people. It's almost like we're one big team. And we're a small company, like we're small in the sense that we know everyone's name, and I don't have any problem reaching out to anyone and report to the CMO. And so there's not a lot of red tape, which I saw early on in my career in Universal Music Group. It's a different experience, but we get to work with our external partners like Netflix and iHeartMedia. And so it's an interesting pivot and different personalities to manage, especially when you have external partners too. But it's almost like agency life. Like I feel like record label life, agency life, and now at Shondaland at a production company, they're very similar in the sense that you have internal, external team members, and you work to collaborate to create an amazing product that you market to people, whether it's music or television or any sort of content. The method is very similar.
There's a lot happening in the world of content and social and fragmentation of where people are. What are some of the challenges that you're seeing working at the scale that you're working at? What are some of the biggest challenges that you and your team are facing right now with getting messages out there?
I'm going to split this in 2 ways because I think from a personnel side, and I wouldn't say necessarily at my job, but I saw this when I was an agency owner. I came as a marketing generalist. Right? So there's a lot of stuff. I know how to do email. I can tinker around with WordPress. Like I can get stuff done. I could build a landing page, not a big deal. And I could post on social media and create content. Now people are coming in so segmented where like I only edit on CapCut and I only do TikTok videos. And being a specialist is fine, but sometimes I'm noticing that people that are the future marketing leaders in our industry, they're not as diverse. Right? So I can only put them in one category, or I can only put you in entertainment, or I can only put you in music, but I can't take you over into television, or I can't take you over into podcasting. And so that's one thing I'm noticing from a personnel perspective is that your team either has to get bigger or you have to focus on 1 or 2 things. And I saw that even in my agency. I used to say we do all digital marketing. And then I said business strategy and social media. And when I was able to kind of pare it down, it was a lot easier for me. But as someone who kind of came in pretty early in that shift, you had to learn everything, but nowadays you really don't. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think from a content perspective, people aren't able to tell if something is real or fake. And I think that's dangerous. In my research, I'm looking at social media influencer marketing and brand blunders and corporate social responsibility. And I think that as creators, you have a responsibility to make sure that you're being as honest or as authentic as possible and letting people know when you're lying. And so I've seen that in my own content. And of course, the dreaded algorithm, but,
right.
But I think now, whereas before these were marketing channels, these are actually distribution channels now. These are now the CNNs, the NBCs, the ABCs. That's your Facebook, your Instagram, your TikTok, right? But I think people have a responsibility and should have a moral and ethical standing on what you put on social media. And I don't think that's happening yet. I think it's starting to catch up, or people starting to become alert of the fact that maybe we should have some ethics on social media. That's where I'm seeing some of the industry go to now. It's like we need, for people that know how to work these platforms and how to control budgets and direct people, we have to start training some of these creators so that their ethics align with their content. But I'm hopeful that will begin to change soon.
I hope. It's interesting, just kind of the way that even the different platforms are shifting.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who creates content, but when something comes up, I don't even know for sure these days where to post it.
Yeah.
To be able to, and so, I mean, both from like what you're doing personally, but also from like the Shondaland perspective,
mm-hmm.
like how much does that factor in? And like, how hard is it to work? You say you're working, almost 3 quarters in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what happens when the landscape shifts before you get there, right? Because like that's a thing now.
Yeah. You have to shift. You have to pivot. I will say this, like I don't move and jump with every shift, right? So like when Clubhouse came out, I think I was starting to I don't think I was applying to Shondaland yet, but I had a lot of clients that really wanted to use it. And I was like, do you know how to use audio? Right? Like basics. I think from a Shondaland perspective, you're weighing your options. I've been in social media for over a decade now, so I've seen kind of the ebbs and flows, very similar to the music industry with Apple Music rolling out and, records and cassettes. Right. It's similar. So I can't afford to jump on every trend. But if I see that there's promise, like TikTok for me was a very slow burn. I was like, what are we doing with this?
Yeah.
What's happening? Is it for human brands or people, or is it for, companies that have products but don't have services? Right? I'm trying to see, like, how are we using this if you're Glade? Like, how are you using it if you're an institution of education? Right? Like, how are you using this if you're a person? And I think all those approaches are different. Once you get that kind of figured out what your voice is, and even I did the same thing with Shondaland. Like, my first couple of questions when I came in, like, what are we saying? What's our viewpoint? Where do we stand on this? Do we jump in with this? I was a digital marketing manager during the writer's strike too. And so it's like, okay, how deep do we get into stuff? Especially when we talk about show launches, like Bridgerton. And so I remember I was a manager during Queen Charlotte launch, Bridgerton season 2 and 3, I think. And so you give people just enough so that they can amplify your brand, but not enough to where you feel like you owe them something or you're obligated to something. I mean, it's a delicate balance, but as people that are on these platforms every day, from not just from a user perspective, but from a marketer's perspective, you can kind of feel it. But then, of course, look at your data. But I came from a very, a lot of my mentors are very old school. Like, you have a gut feeling. Like, should I jump on this or not? And then for me, pairing with, my own knowledge, I also pair that with data to see, okay, how should we try it? And you can test, So even when we talk about different platforms and what performs well or where to post it, I test it. I try to cater it as much as I can to that platform. So like for TikTok, we will take off some of the captions, but we'll use in-app captions, right? Or we'll take off some of the title slides or the bumpers and we won't put them on TikTok, so it feels a little bit more raw.
Yeah.
Where TikTok is very well produced. You're getting a mini show, right? And so, and we've seen it. Like there are some video. I remember one video we posted. It got like 5 million views, and it was an iPhone. And we have all these beautiful cameras and audio, and everything. But sometimes it's just taking your phone out. So I try to do a mix every once in a while just to test the waters myself to see what does our audience want. Oftentimes when you have a very prolific brand like Shondaland, and Shondaland isn't the first or the biggest brand that I've worked with, but you have to see how the audience responds to you.
It's a little darts at dartboard. Almost, again, which is funny because, it wasn't all that long ago that we were like, dig in your analytics, and your analytics are going to tell you what to do. And now it's kind of like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And we've gone full circle.
I remember coding MySpace pages for my friends and like putting the raindrop background on and putting the MP3 player that matched with the background. Like I remember just thinking the aesthetics of how the page looked. And I feel like that's kind of where we're at now, right? Like if you grew up in an era of social media, or even were in college when social media kind of came out, you use it as a communication tool, but also a tool to build community, right? So not just say what you want to say, but say it to the people that you want to say it to. And so I think that oftentimes creators and even brands, we create in silos and we don't consider our audience when we're making content. And so if I know my most talkative audience is on TikTok, then I'm going to make the content for TikTok and I could repurpose everywhere else. But if I go in there with a strategy to make it for every platform, it's going to be overwhelming for me.
Yeah.
So I try not to overthink it. I try to still stay creative. I'll go outside. I do daily walks. I go to museums. I try to stay inspired by other people's art. And I think that social media now, whereas before it was kind of like a cool hobby, it's an art form now. And I think if you can mix, very similar to music, if you can mix your own originality, your own creativity with the platform, Instagram can be like Apple Music. You know what I mean? Like if you, I can't say it the way I'm thinking it, but if you can think of it as a distribution channel to get your message out there and cater to it, then I think it can work wonders for your brand.
Yeah. Is social media now more brand building than it is community building? So the shift from being social media to social media, where you put the emphasis on the word social and the word media, like I talk about this a lot with, it feels like it's become fully entertainment distribution, everything that you're talking about. And we've kind of lost a little bit of that community aspect. What do you do? What's your goal for Shondaland? Is it like awareness and you're trying to get more people to understand what it is you're producing out there? Or is your goal to like build more of a community?
So my goal for Shondaland is always community.
Okay.
I could. That's what I would say. I hate to say it with any brand, but once you have a good product or service, you have your people, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't have to convince Lexus or BMW to bring awareness, right? The people become advocates for your brand or product or service. I think with Shondaland is different from any other company brand I've worked with is that I've never seen such deep fans of the content, right? Like I've worked with Grammy Award winners, everything, all that aside. People do their whole lives off Bridgerton content.
Yeah.
Their whole platform is commenting on Bridgerton or finding Easter eggs and things that other people didn't see. And they're building platforms, thousands of followers from what they see. Or, and I go through the DMs and I see, what people say. And so I think in addition to building community, you also have to, know these people.
Yeah.
Right? Everyone's focused on followers, and I understand that from a growth perspective. But if 600,000 people were in your living room, you would freak out. Nurture the 600,000, nurture the 5,000, nurture the 1,000, nurture the 500 people that you have and see what they like. And so when I say community building, it's not just getting the numbers. It's actually being able to dialogue, and people expect you to respond, and you can, respond to your own comments. And so I think it can still be social, but I feel like now, especially post-pandemic, people aren't just going out to hang out anymore. They're going out with the people that they love. And so to me, social media, whether it's Shondaland, whether it's a Moxie client or anybody, any brand, you don't just talk to say stuff. You talk because you want to engage with someone. And I think if we can kind of get back to the humanness of social media and realize that there are real people on the other side of these phones and other side of these comments, then community building only makes sense. So I feel like it's become an unconventional way to approach social. To me, it's normal, but I'm also an extrovert, so I feel like it's an unconventional way to approach social media. But that's always how I looked at it.
Thank you for giving me hope, because that was the era that I grew up in too, right? The social, the community, the talking to people, and it just doesn't feel the same way anymore. Yeah. And so it gives me hope to hear that that's the way that you're kind of still trying to use it, and
Absolutely.
You're finding success.
And I think TikTok and Threads have surprisingly been kind of safe havens for that, right? Okay. Threads is, when Threads launched, it felt very 2008, 2006 nostalgia social media.
It did.
I love Threads so much, and I still love Threads, but I think you have to find pockets and platforms that still work for you. I brought back my old school blog last year, I think. I was like, should I do it? And I just wanted a place to express myself on the internet, and I was like, do it.
Yeah.
And so I still have my blog now, and it's so cool.
Blogging is coming back in a huge way, because I think a lot of creators are starting to realize that they're not getting the reach, and they want to go back to the things that they love. Yeah. And so, there's been a huge resurgence in blogs, which is fun.
There's a balance between expressing your creativity and marketing yourself. And I think that people don't realize those are two different paths. Using social media, again, as a distribution tool is great, but you still have to find somewhere where you can be yourself, and somewhere where you can express your art, and somewhere where you can be honest. And I think that with Shondaland, it's amazing because we're a storytelling company, right? So our whole MO is being creative, right? There's still a marketing side to it that I have to do, otherwise I wouldn't have a job.
Right.
So I still have to do some things, but there's also this kind of make-believe that still keeps your creativity going, and you're around super creative people. And that's also what I try to cultivate in Moxie, which is why I feel like the transition to Shondaland was easy, because I would tell my interns or my assistants, I said, everything is fake on social media. So what do you want to do? And they would start to notice. And that's all I want people to do, is be able, if you're a marketer, and I always tell people this, marketing is taking this campaign and this activation and this ad, and you're weaving a story together through those tent poles. I just want you to connect the dots. That's it. And so I feel like it's my job to build something creative enough so that you can connect those dots. It shouldn't be disjointed. And that's why everything can fit together. That's why I can say, okay, go to the website, or I posted this 2 weeks ago, or I ran this ad, because it all makes up for the same story. But I think a lot of people try to do stuff and don't understand that it has to connect. Or it should connect. I won't say have to. It should connect. And the way we've done that has been very different over the years. And so I'm really excited, honestly, to see where we end up.
Awesome. Are you ready to shift gears a little bit? Let's do the Artisanal Insights questionnaire.
Yeah.
Okay, so first question. Who's somebody local, creator or creative, that we should be following?
Brittany Oliver. She is the founder of Lemons to Lemonade, which is, I believe it was a DEI event programming focus. But I believe it still is, but she got rejected from 100 job opportunities. And she wrote this blog and basically turning her lemons to lemonade, and it went viral. That's how I actually met her. I reached out to her. I was like, oh my God, your article's so amazing. And so we ended up being friends, and her events are amazing. She curates such amazing people and spaces and vendors, and she just has an eye for professional development. So definitely Brittany Oliver. I think she's BS Oliver on social and lemons_2_lemonade, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right, yeah.
But yeah, she's amazing.
No, yeah, she is. She is amazing. So good recommendation. Second question, what is a hidden gem in Nashville or Middle Tennessee that we who live here just take for granted?
The Pharmacy. It's a burger spot. I love the Pharmacy. It usually has a line right around the corner. But if you go to, I don't know what part of Nashville it's in. I won't say it's downtown. But there's a location where you have to get up early and just go. But burgers are phenomenal. And I'm a burger girl, so.
Me too.
So, yeah.
We just did a show at the Ryman not that long ago, and they have that like satellite location at 5th and Broad.
Oh, yeah.
And so I got my Pharmacy burger fix. I hadn't had that in a long time.
It's so good.
It is so good.
Yeah.
All the time. Okay. And finally, third and final question, what is your favorite coffee order in Nashville, and where do you like to go?
I'm actually not a coffee drinker.
Okay.
But we'll go tea.
Mm-hmm.
I keep it really simple, but I like Barista Parlor.
Okay.
So they have different locations, but I like the whole vibe. Like I start studying. I get I won't say it's Earl Grey, but it's very simple tea, and I just everyone's there just working or talking or connecting, and yeah, it's a good atmosphere.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Where can people connect with you? Find you on social?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me.
Of course.
I appreciate that, and I'm at Vannesia Darby everywhere. 2 N's, 1 S, I, and A, and you can find me at VanessiaDarby.com.
Awesome. Vannesia, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening. Get involved and stay connected with our creative community at craftcontentnashville.org. You can join our conversations on Instagram, Threads, and LinkedIn. And if you enjoyed this content, please subscribe or follow, rate and review, and, of course, share Artisanal Insights wherever you get your audio content. Now go forth and craft content. We'll talk with you again soon.